Last week we started this series of Out of the Frying Pan. And I was looking forward to it because we're going through the book of Daniel. And the big part of Daniel is filled with faith stories. And of all our times, we need to hear these faith stories. And last week we talked about Daniel 1, where all these young boys are taken out of Israel and brought to Babylon. And they were asked to give up their guiding value, the one that is over all of them. They were asked to give up their love for God and His people and be taught a different way, just to reorder it, not to totally give it up, but make it not as important as it has to be. Not number one, maybe down a little bit. And they said, no. Our guiding principle through all of life is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength. And to love your neighbor as yourself. And that has always got to be one. And that was last week. So this week it's Daniel chapter 2, the dream. And I started thinking about this, and of all the time, I look over the length of my life, and the times that I ask God to forgive me most are my college years. And I just go there. And I'll give you an example. Meal times are important when you go to college. Well, at least for a guy anyways. But you get together with friends you don't have classes with. And you get to sit with them. And you get to talk and say, oh, how you doing and all this. And undoubtedly, someone will come up to the table and they'll say, man, I had a weird dream last night. And for everybody else, they just, hey, tell us about it. And you just want to hear it. But for me, I always played it as a game. If you read enough psychology books and are creative, you can really win the game here. Oh, let me tell you what you're doing here. You dreamed about this. I think I had this one girl seriously thinking about going to see a psychiatrist at one time. And it was just like, God, I am so sorry for doing it this way. It was just an innocent thing. But our story today is a similar way. The king Nebuchadnezzar comes in and says, all right, I have had the weirdest dream last night. And I want you to tell me what it is. Well, because his wise men would say, well, king, you just need to tell us what this dream is, and we'll tell you what it means. But the king thinks that these wise advisors have been reading too many psychology books and have been really creative. And that's how they get to interpret this. He says, no. I want you to tell me my dream and then tell me what it means. And then he adds this little bit. Or I will kill you. Nobody wants to hear that. But that's our story for this morning. Because Daniel hears this, that he's on the chopping block as well. And he says, oh, give me a little time. I'm going to talk with my God. And then I'll go to the king and I'll tell him what it means. And that's the start of the story. I'm going to start reading out of Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start reading in verse 26 because that's where it starts. It leaps up from. So if you have your Bible reading out of the New Living Translation, I'm going to start at verse 26. And this is a big section, so settle in, follow along with me. The king said to Daniel, also known as Belteshazzar, is this true? Can you tell me what my dream was and what it means? And Daniel replied, there is no wise man, enchanter, magician, or fortune teller who can reveal the king's secret. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the future. Now I will tell you what your dream and the visions you saw as you lay on your bed. So then he's going to tell him his story. This is what's going on. While your majesty was sleeping, you dreamed about coming events. He who reveals secrets has shown you what will happen, is going to happen. And it is not because I am wiser than anyone else that I know the secret of your dream, but because God wants you to understand what was in your heart. In your vision, your majesty, you saw standing before you a huge, shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. And I put this one up there. That's the most frightening one I could get. All the other ones were just like, it was really boring. So there you go. There's your statue. The head and the arms were made of gold, fine gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. And as you watched, a rock was cut from a mountain, but not of human hands. It struck the feet of iron and clay and smashed them to bits. The whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. And then the wind blew them away without a trace, like chaff on a threshing floor. But the rock that knocked the statue down became a great mountain that covered the whole earth. And at this point you're saying, man, that's a weird dream. And Daniel goes, let me tell you what it means. Here we go. That was the dream. Now we will tell the king what it means. Your Majesty, you are the greatest of kings. The God of heaven has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. He has made you the ruler over all the inhabited world and has even put the wild animals and birds under your control. You are the head of gold. But after your kingdom comes to an end, another kingdom inferior to yours will rise up and take your place. And after that kingdom has fallen, yet a third kingdom, represented by bronze, will rule the world. Following the kingdom, there will be a fourth one, as strong as iron. That kingdom will smash and crush all previous empires, just as iron smashes and crushes everything it strikes. The feet and the toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that the kingdom will be divided, like iron mixed with clay. It will have some of the strength of iron, but some of the parts of it will be as strong as iron. Other parts will be as weak as clay, and the mixture of iron and clay, it shows that these kingdoms will be strong, but they will be forming alliances with each other. But they will not hold together, just as iron and clay don't mix. And then he gets to this part. I want you to hear this part. During the reign of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. It will crush all these kingdoms into nothingness, and it will stand forever. That is the meaning of the rock cut from the mountain that not by human hands, that crushed to pieces the statue of iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold. The great God was showing the king what will happen in the future, and the dream is true. The meaning is certain. That's a long, long passage. A long passage, and it's important that we jump into that. And we see God's kingdom here. Because there's some people that hear the story and say, well, let's just stay really superficial here. It's about Daniel. It's about Daniel because God will always be there for his people. Even though sometimes we go, God, where are you? I don't see you. And sometimes we stay there and we think, well, God will never give us anything more than we can handle. Just like he didn't give Daniel anything more than he can handle. But our God always gives us more than we can handle. We always have these things, oh, God, how am I going to get through this? And each time he says, it's not for you to get through it, it's for us to get through this. I will go through this with you. So I think we go the short route of being superficial in this. This is about the rock. This whole story is about God's kingdom that is established. Jesus is the rock. And if we miss that part, we miss the whole idea of this story. Sure, God is with Daniel, but we talk about Jesus, the rock that was the rock that was rejected by the builders, but became the cornerstone of this entire kingdom that God is establishing. In 1 Peter it says, Jesus is the stone that makes people stumble and the rock that makes them fall. Our God is setting up his kingdom. It was Jesus who was always laser focused on God's kingdom. And you go anywhere in the Bible, he's talking about, let me tell you about God's kingdom. Let me tell you about it. I'm excited about it. In God's kingdom, the servants are the greatest. The servants are. Mind blown. But that's God's kingdom. In God's kingdom, love is the center. Loving God as well as loving each other. That's the center, not might makes right. Not about if you're strong enough, then you can be the leader. It's about love. That's God's kingdom. God's kingdom is like a valuable pearl that you should give up everything just to have it. Would you give up everything for God's kingdom? That's God's kingdom. And Jesus was always talking about it. He'd say, my kingdom is not of this earth. If it were, my followers would riot and rise up, but it's not of this world. We are citizens of God's kingdom. And Jesus was always talking about this. He said, God's kingdom isn't for everyone. Not all people are going to be there. And we need to come to terms with that. We want to draw people into God's kingdom, but not everybody's going to come. And the big reason for that is this. We all want our own kingdom. We all want our own kingdom. We've seen the news, haven't we? Just a little bit. Hopefully you've only seen a little bit of the news, because otherwise you just want to pull your hair out. And it's just not good. But the part that has gotten me lately is this autonomous zone in Seattle. This idea that in the United States, a grouping of people says, you know what, I think this is a place that we want to kick out all authority. We're not following anybody else's rules. We're going to set up the rules. We are going to have our own kingdom. We're in charge. That's the way it should be. And this past week, there was a shooting in this zone. And what do you do? The first thing someone gets shot, people in the zone go, oh, we got to call the cops. It's like, you just kicked them out. And they called the cops, oh, we'll send an ambulance. And the ambulance gets there and says, I don't think it's safe to go in there. And they didn't even go in there to treat the person who had been shot. They had set up an autonomous zone where all the authority's gone. It's might makes right. It's not God's kingdom on earth. It's our kingdom. The way we set up, it's lawlessness. It's whatever we want to do. And in case we forget, without Jesus, that's us. We want our own kingdom. We want it our way. We want to make it that we are citizens of our own kingdom, not God's kingdom. Our God says, unless I smash every part of your kingdom, you're not a part of mine. I need to smash every bit of who you are that wants to set up your own kingdom. Because it's my kingdom. It's where love reigns. It's where servants are the highest. That's what I want to set up. And unless I smash yours, you're not a part of my kingdom. And we instantly go, no, I want to set up my own. And we are battling with God over this. And we don't understand that our God's got to knock away all of the ways that we want to set up our own way of doing things. But how? If you're here this morning, you're saying, all right, Jesus, I want to be a part of your kingdom. I want to do it your way. I want to be God's kingdom. I want to be a part of that. And each of us, when we leave here, we have to figure out, what does that mean? How do I show that I'm part of God's kingdom? How do I bring His kingdom? Well, we show that we're citizens of God's kingdom by saying, I trust Jesus that He has removed all of my sin. That when He died for me. That I trust that He did it. That we prove that we're part of His kingdom when we do that. And the way we do this is we leave here and we prove that we're part of God's kingdom by making it evident where we go. More and more evident every day that God's kingdom is coming here on earth as it is in heaven. And you're saying, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? Because I just saw the news with the autonomous zone. But even more than that, how do I even bring it into my culture? Who doesn't want to hear about God's kingdom? of all the things that I prayed hardest about this week, it's about how we bring God's kingdom to earth as it already is in heaven. And I had a coffee with a friend, Paul, and we were talking about what does that mean in our present culture? What does it mean? And this was the part where I go, man, do I go there? Do I not? And Paul convinced me. All right, thank you, Paul. What does it mean as far as racial relations? How do we bring God's kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven and make it totally relate in regards to people that may not have the same skin color? Because that is such a hot button issue right now. It's so charged. And we need to talk about that. In places we can't have conversations about it, we should have a conversation here about it. Because it is so important. How do we make that? When I talked with 4 pastor friends of mine. One was Pastor Talbert. And in the middle of it, I said, hey, I'm hoping we can talk about this and be honest with each other and still leave as friends. And I'm hoping the same here, that we can talk about such an important thing and still leave as friends. Because it's so charged. You know, Jesus would talk about God's kingdom, and race is not an issue in God's kingdom. It's just not an issue. It's a non-factor. It doesn't matter what color you got in your skin. We are all lost without our God. And we all come to the feet of Jesus and say, you are my Lord. It's just not an issue for Jesus. It didn't matter. He would walk and talk with the Samaritans as much as he would talk with the Jews. It didn't matter. And we make it an issue. We, as Christians, need to stomp out racism that seeks to divide us. We need to do that in our everyday world. Where we see it, we need to stomp it out. That's just a non-issue for other people. We need to do that because we hope to bring God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. We need to call out people who are promoting it. And I say that for people with all different colors of skin. Plenty of people that I know that are black that are just as racist as the white ones. And it's like, what is going on in our world? But we need to do our part to call it out. And any laws that come on our books, we need to stand up and say, that is not right. You know, I didn't grow up in the Jim Crow era, but that's just not right. And we need to stand up against any law that is there. And this is the part where we can say, I got you. Yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board. But this is where we usually grab talking points. And we say, well, this is how it means it in this area. And we go to the right or we go to the left or we go crazy. And we don't talk about, we don't stay focused on God's kingdom. In God's kingdom, they look at our present world and say that there are more spiritual issues that go across all cultures, go across all races, that we are not talking about. There's spiritual issues that we are not doing. No, I want to talk the Democrat side or the Republican side, or I let the media twist me so that I think one way or another, and I'm all up in the air. And we don't talk about God's kingdom. Let me give you a couple ideas here, and take them how you'd like to. This is that part where Matt's wading into the deep water. So hopefully you hear my heart when I talk about this. These are things that go across all people. They're spiritual issues. We want to talk about fatherlessness in our cultures. These are things that it manifests in the black community so deeply, but it goes across the board. And in the Hispanic community, it's like 50% of children grow up without a dad present. In the white community, it's like 25% that they don't have a father there. In the black community, it's 4 out of 5 children grow up without a dad in the home. And one of the biggest predictors of poor grades in school, of poverty, is all these things. It's a lack of dads in the homes. It's not a black or white thing. It's a universal spiritual issue that we're not doing life as God has called us to do it. And for me, it doesn't matter what race you are. I want to help a marriage grow so that families have dads there to help them out. That it's a family. That is God's kingdom. It's not one race or another. It's God's kingdom. We need to talk about that because that is huge. And nobody's talking about that. But that directly relates to the issue we're talking about. We can talk about schools, performance in schools. Don't just put a black square on your Twitter feed. Do something about little kids reading and writing. Doesn't matter what their color is. We want people to... Schools used to be that they taught people to read so that they could read their Bibles. If you have people that are growing up that they can't read, they're not going to read their Bibles. They're not going to hear that. We want people to read so that they're a productive part of society. Find a way to mentor somebody, to read to somebody, to volunteer so people succeed in school so that they can hear the good news. What about church relations? What about churches? The most segregated hour of the week. What about churches? I have been so blessed by my black brothers and friends that are pastors. I have been so blessed. And every time we have Pastor Talbert up here, everybody's going, wow, let's keep him for another week. Everybody does that because you guys value God's kingdom that transcends color. That is what we're going at. We're saying, I need to have great examples of other people, of other races and other colors that I just don't have that little bit. Oh, I see that on the news. Oh, those people are so different than me. They don't want the things that I want. No. Everybody wants the same thing. They want good schools. They want safe environments to grow their kids. And Christians, no matter what color you are, you want to hear about Jesus. And you want to make it right in this world. You want to bring God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And I want you guys to see that so much. It took me into college to get to that. I'll tell you my story some other time, but I didn't have great pictures of people of other colors, and it just twisted parts of me. I want that for you guys to see great men and women of God who love Jesus, and it doesn't matter what color you are, and then we can have conversations about all the other things. But we bring God's kingdom at the center. Let's talk about those things first, and then we can talk about these other things. I don't have all the answers, but I do know that unless we zero in on God's kingdom and how Jesus knocks apart every other area of us trying to do it our own way, it is never going to get any traction. And we will always be spinning our wheels, blaming somebody else, calling somebody else racist, or however it is, and never getting down to bringing God's kingdom, His justice, to earth as it is in heaven. Hopefully we can all leave as friends still, because those are tough things to talk about. I want us to grab a hold of, we are God's kingdom's citizens. That is where our allegiance is. And everywhere we go, we bring God's kingdom, that it might come on earth as it is in heaven. That's what I hope for us. I want to end this way, because I want you to leave with that as your focus. Your main focus. You are a citizen of God's kingdom. Not of the right or the left or however it goes. You're God's kingdom. Don't be twisted in the wind by our media. Stay focused on God's kingdom and bringing that. But St. Francis of Assisi had a prayer for people like us who wanted that. And then there was so much distraction in the world, but he said, this is what I want for us all, God. Would you keep them? And he made this prayer. So I want you to keep your eyes open on this one. And the band will come on up after. It'll be fine. We'll have a little lag time in there, but I want this prayer to be yours, and I printed it up on the slides. This is my prayer for us all. So Lord, make us, I'll use us, instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, may we sow joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console others, to be understood as to understand others, to be loved as to love others. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.